Welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. I'm Liz Hirsh Naftali, and we are back. It's season 2, and today I'm having virtual coffee with Senator Tammy Baldwin from the great state of Wisconsin. And the reason for this podcast, I just like to say in the beginning, is because in a time when we see so much partisan politics, I thought, why don't we just get to know who the people are on both sides of the aisle, for their home, their heart, their humanity, where they come from, who they are. And so we're continuing those conversations. And I think we're very unique because we don't get into the politics and policy, and we're really here to uplift and to bring people together. So on that note, I want to say welcome to Tammy Baldwin, and thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And like I said, if we were together, I would be giving you a cup of coffee. So I owe you one for the next time.
I can't wait.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I thought about something, we've met over the years at different things. And, when I was thinking about this podcast, one of the things like I talk about is the character of people. And I just wanted to start off by telling people listening and viewing 3 of the adjectives that I think about for you are that you're very dedicated, you are kind, and you're passionate. And that's sort of who you are as a person. And I know you bring that to politics, but that's who you are as a person. And today we're going to talk about that. And, also that you're a first of so many things. You're the first woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress from Wisconsin, the first woman to be elected to the Senate from Wisconsin. And you also are the first person to win and to run as an openly gay person. And these are all like incredible pieces, which we'll get into. And I'd love for you to talk to us about, because I think that people who are listening are looking for models, looking for people and saying, oh, wow, that could be me. And so in a way to sort of introduce you, I just want to talk a little bit about your character and a lot about your first, because you are the first. And I know you have seen others that have come and you will not be the last.
You're absolutely accurate about the firsts that you list. But I want to start at the beginning, which is the first time I ran for office, I was the third. And that mattered because I needed to see a role model to know that I could do this. So my first elected office was the Dane County Board of Supervisors. And there were 2 supervisors who were openly gay, Dick Wagner and Kathleen Nichols. And I know that I struggled when I first ran for office, thinking that if I run and I'm out, I probably will lose. And if I run and I keep in the closet, it will create all sorts of difficulties because I'm not being truthful with the voters about who I am. And it was their modeling of leadership that made me decide that I could do both. I could run for office, which I was passionate and very interested in doing, and I could be out and I could win. And I did. But I think having role models for me made it possible for me then to take the next steps. And the next time I ran, I was the first out member of our state legislature, our state assembly. As you mentioned, the history-making nature of my first run for the House of Representatives and my run for the United States Senate. And so I understand, because of my role models, that seeing someone there that looks like you, that has some of the same story as you do, makes it much more possible. And I have also, perhaps because I've reached fairly high office, I've heard from some of the people that I've influenced, a little note, a little letter saying, I heard about you, I read about you, I saw you, and now I think I'm going to pursue a certain course of action. But I want to say to others out there that everyone who's a leader has a ripple effect. And you don't always get a note or a letter saying that you had an influence on them, but your leadership and being a role model is still powerfully important.
That was really beautifully said, and I agree with you. The ripple effect. So thank you. I'd like just to give people a little idea, because people across the country and the world are listening, what is special about Wisconsin. You can't take a long time. Just give us what is special besides the cheese, which I know you're passionate about, but what is really special? Because Wisconsin is a beautiful state.
It is amazing. And so people think about Wisconsin as being in the center of the nation and, away from the coasts. Well, Wisconsin is not away from the coasts. We have our East Coast, which is the Lake Michigan. We have a North Coast, which is Lake Superior. And our West Coast is the St. Croix River and the mighty Mississippi. And I think one thing that people don't really understand about Wisconsin is just how important our water resources are to us, recreationally, but economically. And it makes our state so beautiful and such a desired place to live in and visit. I would also say the people. If you think about the history of our state, it was Wisconsin that elected fighting Bob LaFollette to the United States Senate and as governor. He was a Republican who founded the progressive movement and the Progressive Party. The work ethic from our state is incredible. And you said I can't be very long-winded about this, so you stop me when you're ready. But the cheese I would add is outstanding.
Right, right. You are famous for it, and I know that you're passionate about it. And it is something that people do think about cows and cheese. So it's an important one.
Yes. So our agricultural economy is a big part of our state's economy. We also make things. Talked about our work ethic. We are home to iconic manufacturing that you would know worldwide, but we make things and we grow things in our state.
I'm going to come back to the make things, but for now, I'd just like to know, we're talking about like mentors and people that you can help, but like you were raised by your grandparents.
Mm.
Can you talk about like what they instilled in you and how that was? Because I think a lot of people don't realize many children grow up with their grandparents, and that
Yes.
is a very beautiful thing. But what did your grandparents, in your case, what did they give to you growing up that I think you probably carry very strongly with you to this day?
Yeah, well, love and stability to begin with. And, you know, there's usually a set of circumstances that precede being raised by grandparents. And I'll tell you my own family's circumstances. My mother was 19 years old when I was born, and she was going through a divorce at the time I was born. And she moved in with her parents, my grandparents, at that time. My mother, throughout her life, struggled with mental illness as well as addiction to prescription painkillers that she was prescribed by her doctors for chronic pain. Those struggles really made it almost impossible for her to be my primary parent. And so my grandparents were. And again, the love and stability, I would have been a completely different person without their love and their stability. My grandfather was a research scientist at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, originally born and raised in New York City. My grandmother she was an artist, and when I was just a young person, she was at the theater department at the university doing costume design and history of costuming and helping the students create the costumes for all the theatrical productions every semester. And so, but they met, she was born and raised in England, and they met when my grandfather was doing his postdoc work at Cambridge University. And all so the relatives from England and the relatives from New York say, how did you end up in Wisconsin? And that's how, and for a long time in my life, and I would know I'm getting into a lot of detail here, but I thought I was the first in my family to be born and raised in the state of Wisconsin. And I learned when I finally began understanding my father's side of the family, the Baldwin side of the family, which I didn't learn about until many, many years later, that I was nowhere close to being the first person in my big family to be born and raised in Wisconsin, which led me down a journey to learn about the various places that the Baldwin side, that family, where they'd lived, why they settled there. And that's been an excursion that's really fun too.
I appreciate that. And I also know that you do like to do like do yourself projects. And did you
Yes.
get that from like your grandmother watching her doing those things? And maybe you could tell us about one of your later projects, one of the latest things you've done, because I know you like
Sure.
hands when you have time.
Absolutely. So, in terms of, there's no question I got this from my grandmother. And if you think about it, my grandfather, as I said, was a research scientist at the University of Wisconsin, ran his own lab. My grandmother did everything in the household, in addition to her career as an artist and a costume. So she did the electrical work, she did the plumbing, she basically did all the household engineering, as well as created these amazing products. So, and when she was trained in art back in England, she was trained to be an art teacher at a technical college, basically, or an art school, where she was teaching calligraphy, she was teaching bookbinding, she was teaching costuming and sewing. She was every discipline you can imagine in the arts. And back then, it was much easier to make a living. The university needed a calligrapher for the diplomas that were done by hand, right? So she was just amazing to watch. And that's definitely, I learned how to sew before I was in first grade, just rudimentary things. And so those are among the things that I do. I also do a little bit of carpentry. And let's see, which is my most recent project. I just got through a really hectic campaign, so I haven't had as many projects recently. But one thing, I'll tell you one thing that I'm just sort of in the middle of right now is I have a 100-year-old wooden trunk that has been passed down through the family, and it's gotten a little bit worse for wear. So I'm taking it apart and trying to put it back together so it'll last another 100 years.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
kind of
good.
fun.
Okay, well, we'll catch up later to figure out if you get it done.
Yes.
You can find the time. Talk a little bit about school, because I really talk about that with everybody. I know for myself, I had teachers to this day that something happens and I'm thinking what my teacher taught me or where I was. And so I found amazing stories. Can you just talk about, could be from elementary or high school or college, one or two experiences with teachers that really impressed you when you were young that are still with you?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to give you, it's not necessarily a teacher, but an employee of the school.
That's great.
My middle school guidance counselor. Now, my middle school guidance counselor had, the regular duties of a guidance counselor, but also was the sort of school employee in charge of student government. And so when I was early on in middle school, I ran for school government, right? And I found something there. And not only was she sort of the guidance counselor, but she also was very focused on leadership development skills for those who she saw as promising leaders. Opened up the opportunity for me during the summer between it must have been sixth and seventh grade or seventh and eighth grade to go to a leadership camp, basically. And that was amazing and really opened some doors. We don't often break down what leadership means and how leaders are developed. And she gave me that opportunity. And so that's
Because
somebody.
she saw you were a leader.
Yes,
She could
yes.
tell, she brought that out and gave you that opportunity, which is
Absolutely. And then once I was involved in student government as sort of an extracurricular activity, that proved to me that getting things done was really rewarding. And it really opened up an idea that led to my running for office beyond school, not just for school government.
yeah. No, that it's great. And question I also ask is like, what's the worst advice, the best advice that you've received, and what's the advice you give to younger people?
Oh, well, let's see. In politics and in the offices of which I've served, on the county board, count your votes, right? Before you go in, count your votes.
Look, I think it's a metaphor for, and it goes across other careers and other things. Count your vote. Know what you're doing. Know where you're going.
And then I think Barbara Mikulski, when I got on the appropriations committee, she was a mentor and first of all, helping me think about strategically, how do I get on that committee? But once I was on, I think she just basically said, document everything, because oftentimes the details get lost. And if it was your brainchild, you want a document that shows I actually was the first person to think of this and to get it included, or,
And have a date on it so that I agree. Yeah.
Bad advice. Well, let me put that on hold for a second
That's
because
fine.
I hopefully most of the bad advice I got I didn't follow.
Exactly. That's good.
But let's see. What was
What's the
the
advice
my
what your
advice?
advice? Yeah, like, what is a line that you would say or a comment that you would give to people, young people?
Well, I would say just dive into it. So I had a double major in college, mathematics and government. The government probably doesn't surprise at you. The
Well, the
mathematics,
mathematics was so you could count your votes, so I'd be very
absolutely.
yeah.
I'd be able to read a poll and understand, But all of that said, my advice is it's not just enough to study the principles. Dive right in. And so especially if I were advising somebody who was interested in the political process, maybe running for office someday, I would say volunteer on somebody else's campaign. Research who's running for the city council, the school board, the county board. If you find a candidate that you're inclined to support, call up because at the grassroots level, they're dying for volunteers. They're dying for folks to help. But that's exactly how I demystified the process for myself. Right after college, I moved back home. I was very interested in policymaking. And so I volunteered on a whole bunch of campaigns. So dive right in would be my suggestion. The other thing I did, I took a gap year between college and law school, and I interned for our then Democratic Governor, Tony Earl. And I got all these projects. Again, they have more than enough work. So you have a really eager, smart, young intern. I got to do so many things and see what was happening from the inside. And it really did also bolster my conviction that running for office was the way that I wanted to make change. Not as the only way, but since I was so determined to work on some really important issues, I think seeing it, from the inside was really helpful in solidifying that decision.
Dive right in.
Yeah.
You sit on the edge, you're not gonna get the experience.
Right.
Okay, so now, speaking of not being able to sit on the edge, I have this rapid questions, and they're basically 1 or 2 word answers. You can expand, but they're
Okay.
just sort of fun ones to get to know Tammy,
Okay.
and they're pretty easy, I think. What is your favorite sound?
Music.
Okay. Favorite color?
Blue.
Okay. Favorite smell or scent?
Well, in this season, I'm going to say hot apple cider as it's becoming so tasty.
Yeah, and it's a little cold out these days.
That's right.
Okay, are you a dog or a cat person?
Both.
Okay. Favorite meal? You get to have one meal, pick your favorite.
Dinner.
Okay. And what would that dinner be?
Well, I'm on a Mediterranean phase right now, so it's likely to have tomatoes, cucumbers, celery, avocado, yeah, and maybe, a little salmon or just a big salad.
Okay, sounds good. And if
Throw in
you
some olives too and feta cheese.
okay, that makes it really Mediterranean and really
Yes.
tasty. Favorite dessert?
Hmm.
Mine's
I'd
carrot
say
cake. Mine is carrot cake.
can a chocolate chip cookie
Oh
count?
my god, that's my second. So yes, it's perfect.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I know that you read. You love to read. Can you just give one book? It doesn't have to be only like one book that you've read recently or not so recently that you just comes to your mind as like one of the better books you've read. I don't like to say best book because I think it's always moving.
Oh yeah, that is a hard one. Well, I can tell you what I'm in the middle of, and I've been in the middle of this for a while, is nonfiction. So, Empire of Pain, about the development of narcotic pain-killing medication. And, reading it is both instructive for my day job, but it also just reminds me, very personal level, when my mother was hooked on OxyContin and oxycodone, and how difficult these issues are, and the fine line between the need to treat chronic pain and the need to make sure that somebody isn't becoming harmfully addicted to something. So that's kind of it's a tough one, but
Listen, it's a tough one, but I think that it goes again to what this is about. We're talking about heart and humanity.
Mhm.
And what you're describing does not have to do with what state you come from or who you voted for. I mean, what you're talking about affects I believe probably everybody in America, in their family or in their friend group. I know for myself personally. So I think we do need to keep reading about it and keep figuring out. And you and your work need to work obviously across the aisle, but work with your colleagues.
Mhm.
This is a crisis.
Yes.
So, I mean, I didn't mean to get on that divergence, but it's really personal to me in many ways as well. So I get it.
Yeah.
And it's an easier one now. Favorite household chore?
I don't know, maybe laundry?
Okay. And what if somebody
I
said,
like putting it in the washer. I don't so much like folding everything up afterwards.
you just like putting it away and putting it on the machine and letting it do its thing?
That's exactly it.
What is Tammy's superpower?
Superpower, oh my gosh. In part, I think inspiring others.
That's beautiful. Okay. I'm going to ask you now that I started with the 3 adjectives, give if somebody said, what are a few adjectives that describe who you are? What would you pick?
You said dedicated. I would have maybe said committed instead, but I do feel a real commitment. I also I don't think this is an adjective, but I feel called to do what I do. And that's that's an important aspect of, keeping, how would I put this?
Well, that's why I called you passionate. That's why I
Yeah,
used the word passionate.
right.
You're talking about it from the other side. You have a calling, but what you're doing, you do with great passion.
Right. And it keeps me from feeling defeated, which is very important to me at this particular moment, right? Of, uh, you know, it, it's still important that we keep up this fight and that we do it well.
And I'll just remind you, one of my other adjectives was kind. I think you are a very kind person, and we need more kindness. Kindness is something you talk about, the ripple effect. I think when we are kind, others are also kinder.
And I've been described as authentic.
Mm, yeah, that's a good word.
And in politics, where there's a lot of performance involved, you can often tell the difference between the folks that are solely performing and folks who, may be giving a speech or maybe, giving an interview, but that there is an authenticity to what they're saying and it's not solely a performance.
Yeah, well said. Okay, we're on the last question, which I've asked many people, and I love the answers. My question is, what brings you joy, and how, if you have joy, do you spread your joy? We may have already said it a bit because I know we've
Well,
talked about
and it's sort of personal joy when I know that I or we have made a big difference in people's lives and positive big difference in people's lives. That brings me great joy. I will tell you a story. One of the political achievements, policy achievements that I claim credit for is when I was in the House of Representatives and we were writing the Affordable Care Act. I authored the amendment that allows young people to stay on their parents' health insurance until they turn 26. That used to be the age demographic that was the most uninsured of all age demographics. So I go to colleges, campuses frequently, and I'll often say to the students, whatever the topic that's brought us together, I'll say, just by the way, raise your hand if you're on your parents' health insurance. And usually almost every hand will go up. And that brings me joy.
it
That
should.
brings me huge joy.
Yes, it's beautiful. It's that is the ultimate thing of a public servant, is to be able to see that they don't have to know everybody they're helping, but to see that they are helping and to see that they are there for the people. So that's a great story. We're going to end there. And I'm respectful. I know you've got places to run and things to do, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your heart, your humanity, a little bit of your home, where you come from. And I just want to really say grateful that we've had this 30 minutes, and I look forward to actually being with you in person and having a cup of coffee or tea soon.
I do too. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.